Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our episode of Bedlam Beyond Mental Illness. I know it's been a while. We're sorry. We've had lots of stuff. Not gonna tell y'all about it today, but maybe one day we'll be ready. Who knows? Anyways, we are your hosts, Randi-lee and Renata DeCarmen. Wrong hand.
Yeah.
And so we are going to talk lobotomies. I'm so excited. I find them super interesting. I did the research this time. So let's get to it.
Okay.
I have some pictures this time too, and my notes. Okay, so let's bring the pictures. So you're gonna have to come over more because now we got pictures and it's taking up part of the screen. I know this chair is so wide. Okay. What is a lobotomy? Let's start first with what is it? I think there's a way I can make this even like, oh, no. Oh, ooh. Oh, there we go. That's a little.
I was going to say, seeing it that big was disgusting.
Yeah. I'm going to change it like that. Okay. I like that. Okay. So lobotomy is a type of brain surgery that involves severing the connection between the frontal lobe and other parts of your brain. So that's why it's in there like that. Surgeons would drill a pair. So originally, surgeons would drill a pair of holes into the skull, either at the side or the top, and push a sharp instrument called a lobotomy into the brain. The surgeon would sweep this from side to side.
Oh my God.
To cut the connections between the frontal lobes and the rest of the brain. Guess how long something like that would take? Guess how long that procedure
I think it only took them like 3 minutes, but it was probably
about 5 is what it said. Average of like 5. Hold on, I can't remember what my next.
I only know this from watching. What was that show on Netflix? Ratchet.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. The frontal lobe is involved in many brain processes, including language, voluntary motion, memory, emotions, and problem-solving skills.
So kind of important.
Yeah, it's a pretty important one. So there's a few different types of lobotomies. You have your topectomy, which actually removes parts of the frontal lobe. Your leucotomy, which is the one that severs the connections between the frontal lobe and the thalamus, and a neuroinjection of sclerosing agents.
The hell's that?
So a surgeon would inject these drugs that harden the fibers connecting the frontal lobe to the thalamus.
Effectively
severing. Yeah, just in a different way.
Disgusting and like it shouldn't happen.
Anyway. Right, exactly. So the prefrontal lobotomy, the surgeon drills the holes in either side of the side of the top of that person's skull, and then uses the leucotomy, the big long like ice pick looking thing,
yes,
to then manually sever the nerves between the frontal lobe and other regions
through the hole. So like here,
yeah. So with these ones, these were like the early versions. They drilled the hole first. The transorbital lobotomy works the same way as the prefrontal. So prefrontal, they're drilling the hole and then putting the thing in. Transorbital, which is the one most people know, it's the one that was used most often. They would just put the ice pick type thing, which is called the leucotomy tool, through their eye socket. So
that's what I think I've seen. Yeah,
that's the one that is most often. So that is that was the more advanced version of it. I know, right? It's so advanced.
Doesn't seem advanced,
right? Lobotomies became popular in the 1930s as a treatment for certain mental health conditions, things like schizophrenia, depression, intellectual disabilities, gayness. You could just cut that right out.
You can cut the gay away.
Yeah, just cut it out. Yeah. They were used a lot for prisons for crimes that they blamed on criminal insanity.
Okay.
Yeah. And some personality disorders. The lobotomy was developed in the late 19th and early 20th centuries at a time when there really wasn't drug therapies for mental health disorders, and psychotherapy was very early. They really didn't have it, right? So, I mean, yeah, we know now that let's not cut brain parts apart. But at the same time, I mean, they didn't have any of that stuff back then. So what were they supposed to do, right?
They didn't have,
know.
they didn't have knowledge.
They didn't have knowledge.
The
They
knowledge.
didn't have the medication. They didn't have therapy. Like if you take medication and therapy off the table, what are you left with? Not a hell of a lot.
Right.
So there was no standardized or effective treatments for people with severe symptoms. So they often lived in asylums, which if you go back, go back to, I think, the first episode. That's what we did. Yeah. So in Europe, it really did start in Europe first. Many of the facilities were overcrowded, and that's what led the doctors to look for solutions. Now I gotta
solutions / experimentation.
All right. This is okay. So this time, like last time I talked about it in like a timeline fashion, this one we're going to talk about it as a people, each person, because it just makes more sense for keeping the flow.
All right.
Which it does kind of flow in timeline wise, but anyways, we're going to start with Gottlieb Burckhardt. He was a Swiss physician who supervised an insane asylum in 1891. And he was one of the first people that removed parts of the brain cortex in patients suffering from auditory hallucinations and other symptoms of mental illness. So schizophrenics.
Did he have success with that?
He performed the operation on 6 patients with the specific purpose. Okay, so it depends what your definition of success is, because his purpose was to put them into a state of calm.
So he probably had success because they could no longer,
Exactly. He had success for what he meant to do, but one patient died several days following the operation, and another later committed suicide. Though they say it's unclear whether the suicide was associated with the surgery. But I don't know the correlation. Several of the patients were easier to manage following the surgery. Shocking. We're going to just take out part of your brain.
Right.
His idea for the operation had been influenced by the work of a German physiologist named Friedrich Goltz, who performed brain ablation, which is the surgical removal of tissue, experiments on dogs, and observed distinct changes in the animal's behavior.
Oh, Lordy.
So at this time, the medical community rejected the idea. Okay. And then
why did they reject it? Because it was only
I think
not enough was known.
I think not enough was known. And also, I mean, you're cutting into somebody's brain. I mean, you got to think that can't possibly be a good thing. Plus, if he only did it on 6 people and 2 of them ended up dying, whether by their own hand or someone else's, I mean,
yikes.
That's a pretty high. 2 out of 6.
Yikes.
That's 1 out of 3. That's what, 33%? Look, I mathed. All right. And then we have, no, not him. Hold on. Oh, maybe I don't think I could find a picture of this next one. So we'll just look at us real big here. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Carlisle F. Jacobson and John Fulton. So these guys we're trying to talk a lot about. And yeah. Sorry, I'm looking at my little slideshow. All right. 1935. So remember that Swiss physician who we were just talking about was 1891?
Yes.
1935. So a pretty large gap, right? 36 years. That's a pretty large gap. Hey, that's my entire life.
It isn't. That's my life. It isn't, because I can remember 36 years ago.
I can't, because I was just being born.
You're a bit.
So now we're talking American neuroscientists. Okay, so we're moving into America now. They presented the results of an experiment involving frontal lobe ablation in chimpanzees.
Oh, man. I mean, I know animal experimentation has provided us with knowledge, but I cannot.
I know.
It upsets me.
I know.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. It upsets me too, but that's just what they did. I'm just reading the
notes.
Oh, I forgot to tell everybody where I got my notes from. Okay, we're excited here. Before I forgot again. medicalnewstoday.com, Britannica.com, BBC.com, PsychCentral.com, and 10 horrifying examples of people subjected to lobotomies and their tragic results. Oh, historycollection.com. I was like, where's the website on that? Okay. Yes, we're excited. I didn't just randomly know this knowledge. I did research. Okay, so with the results from the chimpanzees. Prior to the ablation, one of the animals would become agitated when it made an incorrect choice during a memory task. This response was eliminated by the operation. However, the other animal in the study experienced the opposite reaction, having been relatively docile beforehand, and after the ablation, it experienced agitation during the task. So can you say it made a difference?
It made a difference, but
like not a good one?
Yeah, not a consistent, not the same difference.
Right? They just kind of switched.
Yeah.
So they are doing these experiments, and I am gonna say they're failing.
Yeah.
Because it's not having consistent results of what they want.
Right.
Plus, the other guy, I'm going to say he failed when he did it on those patients in the insane asylum.
Right.
Because, again, of the results.
And then it raises the question, how often do you try the same thing and expect different results?
Right? Is that not the definition of insanity?
Yes.
Yeah,
Maybe you should lobotomize yourself, physician.
Bingo. All right. So now we're going to talk about, and we're still in 1935 here. Some of these doctors are reviving the idea. So the chimpanzee thing is happening. They're reviving this idea that was happening in 1891. And we're going to talk about some Portuguese neurologists who developed the lobotomy, which is what we now know as lobotomy. Antonio Igues Moniz and Almeida Lima.
Good pronunciation.
I tried. I don't know if it was right, but I tried.
It was good.
So he created an instrument which contained a deployable wire loop designed to cut sections of tissues. Later models use a steel band to compress tissue cores.
All sounds horrifying, but okay.
Right?
Yeah.
The explicit goal was to change the disposition of people with mental health conditions.
So the goal would be, you and I present with like two different conditions, but they are impacting maybe our lives, the lives of those around us. So they're going to do the same procedure and hope that it affects us. It stops whatever behavior you have that's and it stop. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. Right.
Just trying to wrap my head around it.
It's hard to. Maybe if you got a lobotomy, you could. Okay. Often the procedure made people quiet and docile. So what do you think? Did they think it was a success?
Sure, because love that, right?
Right. So you're quiet and docile now. Woo, we did it. Let's keep cutting those brains.
Yeah.
So they began promoting the procedure across Europe now. So Antonio and Almeida, they are the ones that really started going, we got some success. These guys are quiet. Let's do this.
Is this still in the 1930s?
1935, yeah.
Okay.
So they are pushing it now across Europe. Despite the lack of the convincing evidence that's actually beneficial. So they have very little study on it. So yeah, they've done it, but very little actual evidence. Moniz believed that patients with obsessive behavior were suffering from fixed circuits in the brain. So if they just take those circuits out, you won't be obsessive.
All right, okay.
I mean, at least they had a theory as to why it would work. They weren't just like, it'd be fun if we just cut your brain up. No. November of 1935, Moniz performed the procedure for the first time in a Lisbon hospital. He drilled holes in the person's skull, because remember, we're talking about the early version, right, where they're drilling the holes first, and injected pure alcohol into the frontal lobe to destroy the tissue and nerves. Right?
Oh.
Like, I never knew that lobotomy started with that stuff. Like, I always just thought you hear lobotomy, you think ice pick in the eye.
Right.
Yeah. Nope. Whole lot behind it, which is interesting. But whew. And then Moniz and Lima, they operated on nearly 40 patients by 1937. So within 2 years, 2 years, 40 patients with this procedure.
Wow.
Some of them did improve. Some of them had no change, and some still had relapses with their behavior. So really not consistent.
Negligible positive results from their perspective, I would imagine, right?
Right. And Moniz reported dramatic improvements for his first 20 patients, though.
He's lying.
For sure.
100%.
Right. So despite all of that, the practice was soon widely adopted, largely because, again, there wasn't other options.
Right.
Again, no medication, no therapy. They didn't have anything else. So they're like, meh, let's go with it. Because the procedure, though, met with seemingly widespread success, Moniz was awarded in 1949 the Nobel Prize for Physiology or of Medicine.
Imagine like feeling the need to bullshit your results for a prize.
Right.
Who does that? What?
Right. So yeah, 1949, they're like, this is amazing. Here you go. Along with Swiss physiologist Walter Rudolf Hess. I don't know what he did because I didn't look into that. I just want to say that he wasn't the only one that won it.
All right. All right.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about Walter Freeman and James Watts. So now we're coming to America. Right? So it's having success in Europe. So Americans are going to take over now. American neurologists, they become enthusiastic about this procedure. So again, Walter Freeman and James Watts. Watts promoted a technique that involved drilling or cutting a hole in the skull to sever the connection between the frontal lobe and the thalamus, involved the participation of a surgeon and surgical assistants. Very important to note that Watts said there is a surgeon and surgical assistants in this procedure. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Freeman, he decided to modify the procedure to make it a little less invasive by producing the use of the surgical tool instead of alcohol. Right?
Okay.
And that became the prefrontal lobotomy. So he's the one that's like, let's just jam it into the eyeball. We're not going to do the whole alcohol thing.
Jab it into a hole that's already there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay.
So let's take the alcohol out. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And because Freeman managed to promote the success of the surgery through media, so I'm guessing newspaper, because remember way back then there wasn't this stuff. So I'm going to go with newspaper as your media.
The printed word.
Yeah. Lobotomy became touted as a miracle procedure,
Yikes.
leading to an overwhelming demand for that procedure. So they performed the first lobotomy in the U.S. in 1936. Both Freeman and Watts together did it
All right.
in 1936. They did it on a 63-year-old housewife who was suffering from insomnia and agitated depression.
Of course she was. It was all in her wandering hysterical uterus.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
They think maybe it would have actually been like a mixed bipolar disorder in which manic and depressive symptoms occur together. Like if she was to be diagnosed today, that's their guess. We're never going to know for sure if that's true because, you can't really go back in time. All right, in 1945, so we're skipping ahead a few years. So Freeman and Watts are like, yeah, we're doing this together. This is great. We are on the same page. 1945, though, Freeman decides to modify the procedure again. So remember, he already took away the alcohol. So they're still drilling a hole, but instead of alcohol, they're separate.
Oh, they're not going through the eye?
Not yet. So 1945 they are. That created the transorbital lobotomy. So this is where he could perform it quickly and not leave scarring.
There. Okay.
There it
Progress.
is. Right? So, 1936, Freeman's like, let's not use alcohol. We're still drilling
holes. Okay.
1945, they're not drilling. They're wanting to make it so we can still look pretty after we are lobotomized.
There's no obvious sign of.
Exactly. Yeah. So he used an instrument similar to an ice pick to then enter the skull through the eye socket and pierce the brain. Presumably between the prefrontal cortex and the thalamus. So they're still aiming for that same area.
Yeah.
Just doing it a different way.
Were they sure?
How sure can you be?
Yeah, without actually saying it.
Exactly. That's why I think the drilling was the first step, because then they're like, hey, I can see your brain, so I know where I'm going. But with the eyeball, you can't see anything.
So they're guesstimating the approximate location of what they're looking for.
They have to be.
They're assuming that we all have the exact same brain anatomy.
Yes, exactly.
Physiology or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. So Freeman claimed this method did not require surgical assistance. Remember I said it was going to be important? We don't need surgical assistance. We don't need a sterile operating room.
Oh, no.
And we don't need to wear scrubs anymore.
So we can just do this in our living room if we wanted to?
According to Freeman, yes.
Oh, no, Freeman.
Right? So Watts at this point was like, dude, are you kidding me right now? You're not going to have a surgical team? You're not going to be sterile? Seriously? Peace out.
Thank you, Watts.
Yeah. So Watts severed his ties with Freeman due to concerns about all of that lack of sterility and the crudeness of this procedure, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Watts was out. So Watts performed his last lobotomy in February of 1967. He severed his ties, though, and around 1945, with Freeman. So Watts was continuing on his own.
In his own, to do it his
Yes,
own.
his own way, sterile, with surgical assistant, surgeon, whatever, up till 1967. At that point, a patient he operated on died from a brain hemorrhage.
Ugh.
So Watts was out.
And then he was done.
Yeah. So we're going to focus on Freeman now. Okay, Watts is gone. He pieced out. He said, Freeman, you're crazy. We need to be sterile. 1946, Freeman performed the procedure, this new one with going through the eye socket in a non-sterile environment with no help.
Yikes.
All right. For the first time in 1946. Yeah. So operated on a depressed and violent 29-year-old, I think it was a man or a woman.
Man.
Woman.
No.
Again with a woman. Uh-huh.
Well, women, I guess, more disposable.
Right, exactly.
The general populace.
And women back then, if we spoke out,
especially if she was 29 and she wasn't,
exactly.
She wasn't like putting up babies.
Right, putting up babies, being, yes, sir. What would you like now for dinner?
She's problematic.
Right,
we
exactly.
Don't need her. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Peace out. So the procedure was deemed a success, and the patient was able to return to a relatively normal life.
Yeah, what does that even mean?
Now, here's the thing, though, with this lovely 29-year-old woman. Before doing this procedure, they subdued her with electroshock therapy. So, I mean, there's a lot of suffering going on there. We'll have to look into electroshock therapy on another episode for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah. So it wasn't because she was like, you know what? I need help. No, they're like, you need help. Let's shock your brain and then we'll poke something in it. So Freeman performed very quickly, sometimes in less than 10 minutes, like we said, average of 5.
Wowie, wow.
Yep. It was used on many patients with relatively minor mental disorders that Freeman believed did not warrant traditional lobotomy surgery. Right? So I don't think you need a hole drilled in you. So we'll just do it this way, nice and quick, be done. Freeman toured the country because remember, he didn't need a sterile room. He could go anywhere. Operating on patients in hospitals and sometimes other settings like hotel rooms. Freeman performed 3,500 lobotomies.
Wow.
Estimated 490 of those died from that treatment.
But he was gaining fame and possibly fortune?
I'm going to guess fortune.
Yeah.
In 1967, this is the same year that Watts stopped doing them. Freeman was banned from performing any further lobotomies after one of his patients also suffered a fatal brain hemorrhage. But the U.S. and much of Western Europe have never actually banned lobotomies. The procedure was still performed throughout the 1980s.
Yikes.
Yeah. So it was like, Freeman, you can't do it anymore because you're not doing it right.
So it's never actually been like
legally banned out in a lot of places. Some places have.
Okay.
But some places were just like, we're not using it.
We're just, it's antiquated. It's an old.
Yeah, we're not doing it. But there's no actual legal, you can't.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting.
So we're going to talk in the 1950s. So again, lobotomies became so popular because they didn't have other treatments. In the 1950s, that is when schizophrenia medication, and I'm going to say it wrong, chlorpromazine, also known as Thorazine, there we go, came into the market. And so lobotomies were falling out of favor because a lot of people that were getting lobotomies were what would have been schizophrenic, I think, now.
Yeah.
So they're using now Thorazine because it's way safer, it's non-invasive, it's finally available to be used. All right, so that's a big part of the history. I've got some other things we're going to talk about, though, with them. Effects on people. So a lot of the effects included apathy, distractibility, lack of initiative, lack of restraint in social situations, or euphoria, feeling of intense happiness, significant changes in personalities. Shocking, right? Shocking your brain. Oh, you're different now.
Wow. Yeah.
Some cases, people's symptoms did seem to ease from the procedure, and some were able to return to work, but the effects, they varied, like widely varied. One of the criticisms of the procedure was that it was for the benefit of those looking after the person.
Yep. There you go.
Yeah. But if you recall, the very first ones back in the 1890s was literally with the purpose of making them calm and easier to deal with.
Yeah.
That was the original purpose of this procedure.
Yes.
Risks and long-term impact on people, chronic headaches, seizures, intracranial hemorrhages, so that's bleeding in your skull. Dementia, that causes memory decline, personality changes, brain abscesses, and of course, death. An interesting statistic here I found. An analysis of a U.S. hospital revealed that out of the 245 lobotomies that were performed between 1947 and 1954, how many do you think were on women? What percentage in this hospital, 245 lobotomies, what percentage do you think were on women?
Over half.
Way over half. 84%.
Oh!
More than 3/4. Way more. Like not a little, way more.
Why am I surprised?
Right. Despite the fact that the hospital had more male patients.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
And more men had schizophrenia diagnosis.
Wow.
Yep. So I did mention this quickly. Are lobotomies still used today? They have been banned in some places. They're still performed on a limited basis in many countries, though, which I'm thinking maybe third world ones or something. I'm not sure. I could not find where.
Where or why.
In 1950, Soviet Union straight up banned the use of lobotomies because it was contrary to the principles of humanity. So, go Soviet Union back in the 50s. That sounds like a bad thing because Soviet Union back in the 50s also was not a good thing. But they did one good thing. Hey, this was a good thing.
That was the one good thing.
Yeah. Other countries, including Japan and Germany, followed suit in later years, so they also banned it. But I believe, as far as my research showed right now, that technically it's still legal here. I could be wrong. All right, if I am, throw in some research down in the chat. Make some comments, show us where we can go find. But as far as I could find, it's not technically banned.
Wow.
All right. I have a few people I want to talk about. I'm gonna bring my slideshow back up. So some of these people, famous lobotomies. Oh, this was sorry, I did have a picture of Moniz. So this was that the Swiss neuroscientist way back when that was promoting it in Europe. There's James Watts, one of them. I don't know which one. You remember Watts and Freeman? There's Freeman. Yep, he's nobody said this, but I feel like he's credited with the lobotomy. Like when you think of lobotomy, you think of Freeman because he's the one that made it with the ice pick through the eyeball. Okay, so here's where I'm meant to be. Okay. Famous lobotomies. This is Eva Perón. She was the wife of an Argentine president.
Eva Perón.
Yeah, there we go. Oh. She was a famous actress by the play Evita. Mm-hmm. So she had a lobotomy sometime between May 1st of 1952, which was the date of her last public speech, and her death, which they didn't give me the date of her death, but sometime in there she had a lobotomy. A nurse who had assisted in the procedure confirmed it and stated that it was done without her consent and under heavy security. I don't think I knew that. Yeah, so my guess is that because she was very public and talking out a lot politically.
Yeah.
And we already said it, women couldn't do that back then. My guess is that her husband said, let's lobotomize her. Let's get rid of her.
Her opponents.
Exactly. Next we have, oh no, I didn't have a picture of this one. So Rosemary Kennedy. A lot of people know this one. It's one of the most famous ones. She had a prefrontal lobotomy. The operation was performed by Watts and Freeman. So this was when they were working together. So she must have had that one where they drilled in then. Yeah. Because it was together. She was conscious and under an anesthetic. She was asked to recite the Lord's Prayer and other easily recalled things while they cut into the brain. They would continue until she could no longer respond coherently, at which point they declared the operation complete. Woohoo!
Yeah.
She left the operating table with the mental capacity of a 2-year-old. She was sent to a long-term care facility, and Joseph Kennedy went home to explain it to his wife because she didn't know it was happening. Yeah, I
would kill him.
Right? I feel like as the wife, there was a big spat. It's like, that's my baby. What the heck? This one here, and that's something I don't think a lot of people know. This one here is Elise Roby. I don't know. She's a Quebec singer, actor. She had a car accident that left her depressed. So in 1952, she underwent a lobotomy. The operation was done at the behest of her father, again, without her consent.
Common denominator there, right?
Right. Women and no consent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The lobotomy seemed to have worked for her and she was back to her normal self. However, she had so much trouble finding work until the 90s when she finally made a comeback, and she has written 2 autobiographies. That would be interesting to read, right? Yeah. Then we have Joseph Hasid, one of the greatest violinists of his day. In 1941, he was experiencing severe and sometimes violent mood swings, and his previously observed memory lapses became worse, and he found himself unable to recognize friends. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia in the late 1941. So he was treated using both insulin shock therapy treatment, which we definitely have to look into because we've talked about it, and I have no idea what it is still. There's a drawer there with pens. And was that induced a coma. He also had electroshock therapy. Doctors decided to perform a prefrontal lobotomy on the violinist in autumn of 1950. Got 2 more. We got Howard-lee. This one, this is the last one. This guy, all of it makes me sad because it's horrible. But
Howard-lee. You're looking at his actual.
As far as I know, this is a picture of his lobotomy performed by Freeman.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. You notice how many people are around in this not sterile room and nobody has scrubs on or nothing?
Right.
Yeah. So that's Freeman. He was barely 12 years old when he was admitted to a private hospital.
Oh, God.
He had been given a transorbital lobotomy at the request of his parents, specifically the stepmother.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
He was the youngest patient ever to receive a lobotomy at the hands of Dr. Freeman. 12 years old. And he's like, this is a great idea. Sure. He had recovered from the operation. He eventually wrote an autobiography.
Well, I mean, good for him.
I think that one would be super interesting. Like at 12 years old, Howard-lee gets a lobotomy. And thankfully, he manages to get back to life. Maybe because his brain wasn't fully developed, so it was able to, I don't know.
Regenerate,
maybe. Yeah, but that's crazy. So here is my question, because we always like to end our discussions with a question. I mean, I've asked you a few, but here is my question. Take a guess at how many estimated lobotomies were done. And we have to say estimated, right? Because they could do it in the anywhere.
Yep.
So estimated lobotomies done in the U.S.
In the U.S. Between any years in particular?
Nope. Just how many lobotomies were done in the U.S. total?
Ooh, 30,000.
50,000. How many do you think happened roughly between the U.S. and Europe? So we know 50,000 in the U.S. How many do you think were in Europe?
Oh God, 150,000 total.
Only 10,000 Europe.
Why?
60,000 total?
60,000 total. Why does North America always have to overdo it?
Right? Yep. So from what I read, 60,000 total lobotomies.
That's interesting.
50,000 of them in the U.S.
Yeah. I guess it's not surprising.
I shouldn't be surprised, but like when I saw
it's
that,
shocking. It's not surprising.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I'm electroshocked. I don't know. Maybe it's a bad joke. So yeah, I found the research so freaking interesting.
Yes. Yep.
I had no idea how that it started with the intent of calming people with drilling and then turned to the ice pick thing. That's wow.
I didn't know Eva Perón had a lobotomy. I should have, because I think she's very famous and it probably is a known thing. I'm gonna look into that. I think.
Yeah, do it. I just, I grabbed just little tiny clips of some of the people that I thought were kind of interesting.
Very.
Right.
So I think maybe next time I'll do the research, and I don't know what I'm going to do it on, but there's a few ideas that generated for me. So
yes.
We shall see.
Yeah. And we won't be as long in between, hopefully, because,
life does happen, but.
It does. It totally does. But life was bad happening. It was bad. Anyway,
we could even maybe talking about not the personal details, but about grief.
Oh, we totally could talk about grief. You know what? We should talk about how grief counseling became a thing.
We should.
You should write that down. We're both like, oh, we don't write it down. We know.
Yeah, it's not written down. We never said it.
Right, exactly, because I'm sure it wasn't a thing back when. I wonder when it actually started.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be an interesting one. So of course, if you have any ideas for what kind of history you would like to hear about, any mental health history, then throw them in the comments down below, because we're always looking for ideas.
Yep.
You know, we only have so much brain capacity. We need help. I love how you keep going like out of frame.
I know. I'm sorry. I don't know.
I know it's my chair is so big it kind of pushes your chair. So I'm trying to hit.
And also, I don't know.
sideways.
I don't know. I know the camera reverses things, and I just don't know where I am
It's true.
in space and time.
It's true. Yeah. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And be sure to tune in on a Wednesday morning at 9:30 for the Right or Die show. It should be live again. Last week's was recorded, but this one should be live again, I think. I don't remember who I'm talking to, but
It'll be good.
it'll be good. It's always good. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.